to create a mood, a mentality, a narrative that there was almost genocide taking place. And therefore, once the war is seen in a certain way by world opinion and in world history, it will be possible to flip, as the Americans say, to flip the result of that war. And for a case to be made that the Tamil people of the north and east have to be compensated by a country of their own. This is what happened to former Yugoslavia. This is what happened to Sudan. This is what happened in so many places. The north will begin to be unscrewed from the rest of the country. The results of the shooting war of May 2009 will be sought to be overturned by the use of external players, leveraged by the separatists in Tamil diaspora. And we may see a rollback of the victory of 2009. We are being placed in the dock. The Sri Lankan people, the Sri Lankan army, the Sri Lankan state, Sri Lanka as a country, we are being now placed in the dock for having fought and defeated a fascist enemy. This is a very serious attempt to rewrite history, and it has consequences for the shape and size of Sri Lanka in the future, and for our destiny and existence as a single country.
What is the best defense that Sri Lanka could use against these international forces at the UN Human Rights Council? Could we actually use our Lessons Learned and Reconciliation Commission report? Could we use the Sri Lanka Human Rights Action Plan that has been created? Is it a viable defense for us?
Well, it is, but we are not using it. There are elements of the LLRC report is the best defense we had. It's like body armor, but we haven't worn it. We talk about the LLRC report, but the key recommendation has not been implemented. And what is the key recommendation, Ramesh? The key recommendation is that there are a set of incidents which were quite ugly and which on the surface of it look like crimes have taken place. Now, the LLRC report says that's not true of the whole of the war, that's not true even of the whole last stage of the war. And it says most of the civilian casualties were because the Tigers lodged their artillery among civilians who they used as a human shield. And these were retaliatory strikes by the Sri Lankan armed forces. But there were some very ugly incidents. I mean, we've seen this. This is Prabhakaran's kid. The LLRC didn't mention that because they didn't know about it at that time. The 12-year-old kid was killed. And I don't think that's a fake. Isapriya. I mean, she may have been an ex-tiger who was wounded and therefore talking on Tiger television. But once a person is in custody, I mean, they can't wind up dead without an explanation. Now, the LLRC report said appoint an independent inquiry. Now, we could have done that. We have top jurists, Ramesh, you know this. I mean, the faculties of law, medicine and English in Singapore were set up by Sri Lankans, Sinhalese and Tamils. We have top people. But we could have done this. We could have appointed a commission with credible commissioners and said we have a national inquiry. We could have appointed a credible person to head the National Human Rights Commission and given it more teeth. That's another thing we could have done. We could have appointed someone credible as a national ombudsman, ombudsperson on human rights. These are national mechanisms, national processes which we could have used emanating from or extending the LLRC report. We have done nothing of that sort. We haven't even acted on the army report on the shootings in Valiveria, shootings and the crushing of the skull, by the way, in Gampaha. Nobody has been found guilty. Nobody has been punished. There was a shooting of a young unarmed guy in Katunayak a couple of years ago. Nothing has happened there. I think Roshan. Yeah.
Yes.
27 prisoners killed in a prison massacre. There's a lot of stuff that has happened. Lasantha Vikramatunga murdered 5 years ago. So I mean, where is the credibility? The best thing that we have to do is tell the truth and say, look, these were the circumstances, this is what happened, and we are trying our best, and we are doing our best, we intend to do our best, and start doing our best. We have to, the only defense, the best defense is the truth. We faced a fascist enemy, we fought as hard as we can, and a lot of tragic things took place. We were given the right advice, Ramesh, by two friends in public here. One was a top counterinsurgency expert, the expert who, an Australian expert who advised the Americans on the successful surge in Iraq and also in Afghanistan, David Kilcullen. He came over, he was invited for one of the Ministry of Defense seminars, and he spoke, and it was online, it was streaming live, so it's no secret, and he said, you know, your army did a fantastic job. This was so difficult. Now, why don't you stop this nonsense about humanitarian operation and zero civilian casualties policy? Nobody believes you. Tell the truth. Say that these were the circumstances, this was the situational logic, and yes, some bad things happened, and we are going to look into this. But tell the truth, because it's impressive. You guys did a great, impressive job against a terrible enemy. Do not stick to this stuff that nobody believes. I mean, humanitarian operation. Come on. This was David Kilcullen. He said that. A couple of years before, at a similar conference, Gérard Chalion, a top French counterterrorism expert who was brought in for one of these conferences, he said pretty much the same thing. He said, look, you can beat the Tigers, but you will not be able to stop these guys. They're very strong internationally unless you have a political track, a political solution
to this issue,
to the Tamil ethnic issue. This guy was anti-LTT, Gérard Chalion. He said it here in Colombo. Nobody was listening. Why? Because there was a sense that, hey, we know everything. We know what's best. We know what's best for us. We know what's best for the Tamils. We know what's best for... I mean, we have all the answers. Well, in Geneva, it doesn't look like we are able to convince other people, including those who voted for us in 2009, who are voting against us now. We aren't able to convince them. That line, this line that we are taking now, is not going to work. If we change that line, if we say the truth, as much of it as possible, we don't have to tell the whole truth, but as much of the truth as possible, if we are credible, and if we have the most competent people that we can bring together for this Cold War, then I think we can turn it around. But I do not see that happening, Ramesh.
One last question, Dr. Jayatilleka. Now, 2014 is an election year.
Yep.
True. The opposition is going to have swings at the government. But what do you see the main opposition's role in this issue, as well as the challenges they face in the upcoming elections?
Well, on this issue, look, the opposition invited or had Channel 4 over at Sirikota. Now let's say that's okay, but the opposition should have told Channel 4, do you see these pictures behind us on the walls? Do you see all these pictures? These are our leaders who were killed by the Tigers. This is what the Tigers were. For 17 years, we faced the Tigers. We tried to bring peace, but this is what they did. Now, I don't think the opposition, having invited Channel 4 to Sirikota, actually said that to Channel 4. I don't expect the opposition to whitewash the government. But I do expect the opposition to stand up for the Sri Lankan Armed Forces and to stand up for the justice of a war that we fought. And to point out the unbalanced, one-sided nature of what Channel 4 has been putting out. I'm not saying they're false, but it's tilted. It's spun. The opposition didn't do that. It had an exhibition on Human Rights Day, which is fine, but that exhibit didn't carry any of the violations of human rights by the Tigers. I mean, they should have had that as well. So, I think the stance of the opposition, I mean, there are patriotic elements within that opposition, but they are marginalized. They are marginalized. This is an opposition that's certainly not recognized by the people as standing for the national interest. They have made, I mean, they have the same leader who who signed the CFA and has not, the party has not replaced him. This was the time of national humiliation, those 2 years. The party has not replaced him as the leader, and he has not resigned. For 20 years, we had the same leader. This year is the 20th anniversary of the United National Party being in opposition under the same leadership. The test is going to come at the Western Province election, because 2 elections are happening this year. One in the Western Province, well, actually 3 if you count Geneva, but that's the test for the government. For the opposition, you have 2 elections, the Western Province and the Southern Province. Now, the Southern Province is a toughie because that has been the base of the Rajapaksas. That's where they come from. That's where they put money into. That's where, I mean, that's the citadel. Young Premadasa has managed to keep 3 guys, 3 MPs in the provincial council. He's fought hard. The only guy who's gone face to face with the Rajapaksa machine, but it's a toughie, the South. The Western Province is different. The Western Province is where you have the largest number of income earners, wage earners, people who live by means of a salary. You have the largest number of professionals. You have the largest television watching audience. The Western Province should be to the UNP what the Northern Province is to the TNA. I mean, the TNA won despite the army being there and the government pouring money into that place. The UNP should be able to do that in the Western Province. Now, that's the test. If it can't win in the Western Province, or at least if it can't do well, if it cannot at least get its old 40% base vote in the Western Province,
which normally votes green most of the time.
I mean, and with the economic pressures, which are quite tremendous because of the mismanagement and wrong economic strategy of this government, people are feeling the pain. They're suffering, and they're suffering. Wage workers, in a way, have less cushioning than those in the rural areas. So this is where there should be a big showing by the UNP, but I wonder whether that will be the case, because my sense of it is that the leadership of the UNP has a radioactive effect on everybody, on the campaign, on whether or not party activists are willing to campaign, whether UNPers are willing to go out and vote. I mean, they may go out and vote, but I don't know who they'll vote for. They might vote for the government, or they might vote for General Fonseca's party, or the JVP, which is Lal Khan. I mean, you never know. General Fonseca, especially if Anuma Fonseca is a candidate, you might have something of a wave. So, I think that the drag effect of the profile of the UNP leadership may badly damage the UNP's prospects, even in the Western Province, where it should be at its strongest and most successful, logically speaking.
Right, Dr. Jayatilleka, thank you very much for joining us on Vantage Point tonight as well. We hope to see you again in 2 weeks' time.
Thank you very much.
For all the viewers, that's a wrap from Vantage Point. Good night.